The intersection of race and crime is a complex and deeply troubling issue. It's an issue that has plagued our society for far too long. Racism, in its various forms, permeates our criminal justice system and society at large. This results in profound disparities and injustices that disproportionately impact communities of color. Racism is a system of power and oppression that privileges certain racial groups over others. It manifests in individual acts of prejudice and discrimination. It also manifests in systemic inequalities embedded in our institutions and policies. Crime, on the other hand, refers to acts that violate the law. These acts range from minor offenses to serious crimes. The complex relationship between racism and crime is rooted in a long history of social and economic inequality. This inequality is often perpetuated by stereotypes and biases that paint certain racial groups as more prone to criminality. This association is not only inaccurate and harmful, but also ignores the systemic factors that contribute to crime. It is imperative that we acknowledge and address the systemic nature of racism within our criminal justice system. We must dismantle the structures that perpetuate these inequalities. We must also work towards a society that values fairness, justice, and equality for all. One stark example of racial disparities in the criminal justice system is the use of stop and search powers. This practice grants law enforcement officers the authority to stop, question, and search individuals on the street based on reasonable suspicion. However, studies and statistics consistently reveal a disproportionate targeting of Black and minority ethnic individuals. In the UK, for instance, Black people are 9 times more likely to be stopped and searched compared to their white counterparts. This disparity cannot be solely attributed to higher crime rates among minority communities. Research suggests that racial bias plays a significant role in these stop and search practices. The disproportionate use of stop and search against minority communities has far-reaching consequences. It erodes trust in law enforcement, creates a sense of alienation, and reinforces negative stereotypes. Moreover, it often leads to the over-policing of these communities. This results in a higher likelihood of minor offenses being criminalized. Addressing racial disparities in stop and search practices requires comprehensive reforms. These reforms include stricter guidelines for reasonable suspicion, mandatory data collection on the ethnicity of individuals stopped, and independent oversight mechanisms. It is crucial to ensure that law enforcement practices are fair, unbiased, and respectful of all citizens. The overrepresentation of minority groups within the criminal justice system extends far beyond stop and search practices. It is deeply embedded in the very fabric of the system, reflecting a legacy of institutional bias and discrimination. This bias manifests in various stages, from arrest and sentencing to incarceration and re-entry into society. Statistics paint a grim picture of racial disparities in the prison population. In the United States, for example, African Americans are incarcerated at more than 5 times the rate of white Americans. This stark overrepresentation cannot be explained solely by differences in crime rates. It highlights the systemic biases that permeate the justice system. Factors contributing to this overrepresentation include racial profiling, implicit bias among law enforcement officials, and socioeconomic disparities that make it more challenging for minority defendants to access quality legal representation. The legacy of discriminatory policies, such as the war on drugs, has also disproportionately impacted communities of color. This has led to mass incarceration and the perpetuation of racial disparities. Addressing institutional bias in the justice system requires a multifaceted approach. It includes implicit bias training for all criminal justice professionals, comprehensive sentencing reforms to address racial disparities, and investment in community-based alternatives to incarceration. It is essential to create a justice system that is truly blind to race and ensures equal treatment under the law. Section 4. Socioeconomic disparities, fueling the cycle of inequality. Socioeconomic disparities play a crucial role in understanding the complex relationship between race and crime. Centuries of systemic racism and discrimination have created deep-rooted inequalities in areas such as education, employment, housing, and healthcare. These disparities disproportionately impact minority communities. They create a cycle of poverty and disadvantage that can increase the likelihood of involvement in crime. For instance, limited access to quality education and job opportunities can lead to economic hardship, making individuals more susceptible to engaging in criminal activities. In addition, inadequate housing and healthcare can contribute to stress, instability, and social unrest, further exacerbating the cycle of crime. Moreover, socioeconomic disparities often intersect with other forms of marginalization, such as gender and immigration status. This creates a compounded vulnerability for certain groups. For example, minority women often face a double burden of racism and sexism. This can limit their opportunities and increase their risk of exploitation and criminalization. Addressing socioeconomic disparities is not only a matter of social justice, but also a crucial step in breaking the cycle of crime. Investing in quality education, job training programs, affordable housing, and accessible healthcare for all is essential. By creating a more equitable society, we can reduce the social and economic factors that contribute to crime. Section 5. Psychological Consequences, Internalized Racism and the Self-Fulfilling Prophecy. The psychological consequences of racism cannot be overlooked in understanding the intricate relationship between race and crime. Exposure to prejudice, discrimination, and negative stereotypes can have profound effects on individuals and communities. It can lead to internalized racism, where individuals internalize the negative beliefs and stereotypes about their own racial group. Internalized racism can manifest in low self-esteem, feelings of hopelessness, and a diminished sense of self-worth. These negative psychological effects can contribute to risky behaviors, including criminal activity. This is particularly true for young people who may be more susceptible to peer pressure and seeking validation in environments where criminal behavior is glorified. Furthermore, the concept of the self-fulfilling prophecy comes into play. When individuals are repeatedly stereotyped and treated as potential criminals based on their race, they may internalize these labels and act accordingly. This creates a vicious cycle where societal expectations and individual behavior reinforce each other. Addressing the psychological consequences of racism requires a multi-pronged approach. Promoting positive racial identity, providing culturally sensitive mental health services, and challenging negative stereotypes in the media are all crucial steps. By fostering a society that values diversity and promotes positive intergroup relations, we can mitigate the psychological harm caused by racism and create a more just and equitable society. Section 6. Breaking the Chains, Initiatives and Solutions for Change. Breaking the chains of racism and its impact on crime requires a collective effort from individuals, communities, and institutions. While acknowledging the deeply ingrained nature of systemic racism, it is essential to recognize the power of collective action and the importance of implementing effective solutions. Numerous initiatives and organizations are working tirelessly to address racial disparities in the criminal justice system and promote social justice. These initiatives focus on various aspects, including policy advocacy, legal aid, community organizing, and restorative justice practices. For instance, organizations like the Sentencing Project in the United States advocate for sentencing reforms, promote alternatives to incarceration, and challenge racial disparities in the justice system. Similarly, the Equality Trust in the UK works to reduce economic inequality, which disproportionately impacts minority communities and contributes to crime. Community-based organizations play a vital role in providing support services to individuals and families affected by the criminal justice system. These organizations offer a range of services, including legal aid, housing assistance, job training, and mental health counseling. They provide a lifeline for those seeking to rebuild their lives and reintegrate into society. Section 7. A Call to Action, Building a More Just and Equitable Future. The fight against racism and its impact on crime is a continuous journey that demands unwavering commitment and action from all of us. It is not enough to simply acknowledge the problem. We must actively challenge and dismantle the systems that perpetuate these injustices. As individuals, we have a responsibility to educate ourselves about the history and impact of racism, confront our own biases, and speak out against injustice whenever we witness it. We can support organizations working to promote racial justice, advocate for policy changes, and hold our elected officials accountable. Furthermore, we must amplify the voices of those most affected by these issues. Listening to and learning from the lived experiences of individuals and communities impacted by racism in the criminal justice system is crucial. Their stories can help us understand the human cost of these injustices and inspire us to take action. Creating a more just and equitable society requires a fundamental shift in our attitudes, beliefs, and behaviors. It requires a commitment to dismantling systemic racism, promoting social and economic justice, and fostering a culture of empathy, understanding, and respect for all. Let us work together to build a future where everyone has the opportunity to thrive, regardless of their race or background.